My name is Helen Price, and for most of my life, I've lived simply. I was born and raised in a small town, and after nursing school, I worked for over 40 years at the local hospital. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. I spent my days helping others, doing what I loved. When I finally retired, I found peace in my quiet little home, which I had shared with my late husband, John. John and I had built our home together. It wasn't fancy, just a small brick house in a modest neighborhood, but it was ours. We'd bought it when we were young, with more dreams than money, but we had worked hard to make it ours. We paid off the mortgage years ago, and it felt like a real accomplishment. I remember celebrating that day with a bottle of cheap champagne and a sense of security that came from knowing we owned it outright. It was the kind of house where you didn't need much. The walls were full of memories. Every room had its own story to tell. Now, with John gone, I lived alone. My children had grown up and moved out. My son Chris lived in a different city with his wife Lily. My daughter Maya came by to visit often. She and I had a special bond. We would sit together sharing tea, talking about the good old days. I spent my days in my garden working with my hands or reading my favorite books. I enjoyed my life in ways that others might not understand, but it was enough for me. Maya would visit once a week, and we would play cards with some of the neighbors, most of them older widows like me. It was a simple life, but it was a life I loved. It was calm and predictable. It was my routine, and I felt safe in it. I wasn't rich by any means, but I had my pension from the hospital and Social Security to get by. I'd saved some money over the years, enough to know that I wouldn't be a burden to anyone. I had my health, my home, and my independence. I didn't need anything more. In a world that was always rushing and changing, I found peace in the stillness. My house was my fortress, and it was enough. But it wasn't always easy. There were days when the silence would be too loud, days when I would miss John so much I could hardly bear it. The empty chair across from me at the kitchen table was a reminder that I was alone now, but I wasn't complaining. I had learned to accept that life moves forward, even when you don't want it to. I could still hear his voice sometimes, especially when I was tending to the garden we had worked on together. I knew every inch of this house. I knew every squeak in the floorboards and every crack in the walls. The house felt like it was alive, filled with the memories of a life well lived. It had its flaws, but it was mine. It was the one thing I had left from our years together. My son Chris didn't always see things the way I did. I remember when he first started talking about getting a bigger house, a dream house he called it. He and Lily had been living in a small apartment, and he thought it wasn't enough. It wasn't grand enough. He always wanted more space, more luxury. I had tried to explain to him that it wasn't about size or grandeur. It was about making a home, but he was too focused on the idea of keeping up with the world. Chris had always been ambitious, but that ambition often led him into trouble. He spent more money than he had, trying to live a life that didn't fit with who he really was. He was constantly searching for validation, from his fancy clothes to the expensive cars he couldn't afford. I could see that he wasn't happy, but he didn't want to listen. I often wondered why he couldn't appreciate what he had, why he couldn't see that there was beauty in simplicity. I had worked hard my whole life, and in the end all I really wanted was peace. But Chris, with his endless drive to make it, was always chasing something more. I just hoped he would eventually realize that all the material things in the world couldn't replace the warmth of a loving home. It was a Friday afternoon when Chris called me. I was sitting in the garden enjoying the warmth of the sun. When my phone rang, I saw his name on the screen and smiled. It had been a while since he called just to check in. I answered with a "Hello, Chris. How are you?" But what he said next would change. Before I continue, I want to ask all of you to please give a like to this video and subscribe to my channel, The Silent Stories, for more stories like mine. Your support means the world to me. Also, I'd love to know where you're watching from, so drop a comment telling me which country you're tuning in from. It's incredible to see how far this community of wonderful people has grown, and I'm so grateful to be able to share my story with you. Chris wasn't the same man I had raised. He was always chasing something. He wanted the big house, the fancy car, the life that seemed to make everyone else jealous. But I knew him. He wasn't like that when he was younger. He was hardworking, focused, and kind. But somewhere along the way, he lost himself. Now, at 45, Chris worked as a real estate agent. He was good at his job, but he didn't have the patience for it. His dream was to get rich, and he wanted it fast. He spent more money than he earned. He bought clothes that were too expensive, drove cars he couldn't afford, and went on vacations he couldn't pay for. He and Lily, his wife, always seemed to be living beyond their means. They didn't have savings. They had debt. A lot of it, I didn't understand it. When John and I had been young, we didn't have much, but we had worked hard, saved, and lived within our means. We built our life slowly, piece by piece. Chris didn't see it that way. He wanted it all at once. Lily was just as bad. She didn't want to live in a modest home like mine. She wanted a mansion, and she wanted it now. She was always talking about how much better life would be if they had a bigger house. She would look at my little home and make comments. "You should really think about getting something more modern, Helen," she would say, like there was something wrong with the way I lived. I'd tell her the same thing every time. "This house is just fine. It's mine and it's paid for." But no matter how many times I told them that, it didn't seem to sink in. Chris and Lily were too focused on their idea of success. They wanted more. They thought the house they lived in wasn't good enough, that it wasn't a sign of success. Chris had been hinting at wanting a new house for a while. He'd been sending me pictures of big houses, telling me how much better life would be in a place like that. But I always turned him down. "You don't need all that space," I'd tell him. "It's just a house. It doesn't matter how big it is." But Chris didn't listen. His dream house was just a symbol of what he wanted everyone else to see. A big fancy house would show the world that he had made it. It would show everyone that he had succeeded, even if he had to go into debt to do it. Then one day he called me. I didn't think much of it at first, but when he started talking, I could hear the stress in his voice. He was upset. He told me they had found the perfect house. It was huge, much bigger than anything I had ever seen. A house in a rich neighborhood, with all the things they'd dreamed of. "We're going to make an offer on it, Mom," he told me. "It's everything we want. The only problem is the bank won't approve the loan. They said our debt-to-income ratio is too high." I felt uneasy. I didn't like where this was going, but I didn't want to judge him. After all, he was my son, and he said the bank was being unfair. "They're being ridiculous," Chris continued. "Just a few bills, that's all." I knew better. I'd seen the bills that came to my house, the credit card bills that were piled up, the late fees, the loans they couldn't keep up with. I wasn't blind to their situation, but I didn't want to say anything. I just wanted him to be happy. Chris went on, trying to explain his way around the situation. "Mom, there's just one thing we need. We need you to help us out. We need you to co-sign for the house. It's just a formality. You won't have to do anything. You'll just sign the papers, and we'll be able to get the loan." At first I didn't say anything. I just sat there, listening to him. A co-signer. I knew what that meant. It meant if they couldn't pay, I would be on the hook. It meant I was putting my good credit and my savings at risk for their dream. But Chris was my son, and he sounded so desperate. He promised it would be easy, that it would be a simple thing. I didn't want to see him fail. I didn't want him to feel like he couldn't achieve his dreams. So I agreed. I told him I would help. I didn't want to say no to my son, not when he needed me. It wasn't just about the house. It was about him, about trying to help him build the life he wanted. But I didn't know then that by helping him, I was going to lose everything I had worked for. I didn't know that agreeing to co-sign would lead to something much bigger than I could have ever imagined. It was a Sunday when Chris came to visit. He arrived with a folder in hand, looking more nervous than usual. His smile seemed forced, and his eyes darted around the room, not meeting mine. I didn't think much of it at first. I made tea, and we sat down in the living room, the same spot where we had shared so many conversations over the years. "Mom," he started, his voice sounding more serious than I had ever heard. "We need to talk about the house." I nodded. "I thought you were going to make an offer on it." "We did," he said, his voice shaky. "But there's a problem." I could feel the tension in the air, and I suddenly knew this wasn't just about the house. It wasn't just about paperwork or numbers. Something wasn't right, but I didn't want to make him feel worse. I waited for him to continue. "The bank rejected us," Chris said, his voice dropping. "They said we don't have enough income to qualify. I don't know what to do, Mom. He was quiet for a moment, and I could see the worry in his face. I'd never seen him like this. Chris had always been confident, even arrogant at times. But now his eyes were filled with something else, something I couldn't quite place. I felt a pang in my chest. Was he struggling? Was he really in trouble? I tried to stay calm. What do you need from me, Chris? He looked down at his hands, fidgeting with the folder. I was thinking if you could just co-sign for the house, it might help. The bank just needs someone with good credit, someone like you. I blinked, surprised. Co-sign? I repeated, unsure if I had heard him right. What does that mean exactly? It's simple, he said quickly. It's just a formality. You sign and the bank will approve the loan. You won't have to do anything, just be there as a backup in case we can't make the payments. It's nothing to worry about. His words seemed reassuring, too reassuring. I had always trusted Chris, but something about the way he was speaking didn't sit well with me. There was a sense of urgency, a kind of pressure that I hadn't expected, but I didn't want to question him. He was my son, and he needed me. Are you sure this won't cause any problems for me? I asked, my voice soft but filled with concern. He smiled weakly, his eyes not quite meeting mine. Of course, Mom, this is all good. It's just paperwork. You'll be helping us get our dream home, and we'll take care of everything. It's the least we can do after all you've done for me. The dream home, that's what he kept calling it. I could see the image of it in his mind, the large, beautiful house in the suburbs. I knew how much he wanted it. He had always been a man of ambition, never satisfied with what he had. I had spent so many years teaching him to appreciate the value of hard work and being content with what you had. But now I was being asked to help him chase a dream that seemed bigger than he could afford. But he was my son, and this wasn't about the house. It was about him, about helping him succeed, about making sure he had the life he wanted. I'll do it, Chris, I said softly. I trust you, but just make sure it's all right. I don't want to risk my savings or my home. He smiled then, a smile that seemed a little too wide, a little too eager. Thanks, Mom. You won't regret it. I promise. I didn't know it then, but this moment would mark the beginning of a betrayal I never could have imagined. I thought I was helping my son, supporting him in the way a mother should. I didn't realize I was about to become a pawn in a game he was playing with my trust and my life. The next day, Chris brought the paperwork over. He sat beside me at the kitchen table, his fingers moving quickly across the pages, explaining everything in a way that sounded simple. Just sign here, Mom. This one's for the loan application. This is just your basic information. And here's the good faith estimate. Just a formality. I looked at the papers, feeling a bit lost in the legal language. I trusted Chris. He had always been good with these things, and I figured it wasn't a big deal. I had no reason to doubt him. I signed the papers, each one, without fully understanding what I was agreeing to. But I trusted him. After all, he was my son. He wouldn't lead me astray. The day after I signed the papers, Chris called to let me know that everything was moving forward. The loan's approved, Mom. We did it, he said, his voice full of excitement. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had done my part. I had helped my son get the house he had wanted, and now he promised me he would make sure I had the in-law suite he had talked about. He told me it was perfect. It had its own entrance, a big room, and a bathroom just for me. It sounded good to me, and I looked forward to living near him and Lily. I imagined my grandchildren running around, their laughter filling the house. I couldn't wait. But that was the last time Chris and I talked about the house with that kind of excitement. A few days later, I got a call from him. He sounded different this time, more distant, less warm. His voice didn't have the same energy as before. Mom, I need to talk to you, he said. I felt a knot in my stomach. Something didn't feel right. What's going on, Chris? He paused for a moment, and when he spoke again, his words were careful, almost calculated. There's been a change of plans. We won't be able to move you in with us. I'm sorry, but it's just not going to work out. I felt a sudden rush of confusion. What do you mean it's not going to work out? You promised me I'd have my own space in the new house. I know, Mom. I know, he said, sounding more rushed. but the house is just too big for us to handle. We've been thinking, and it might be better for you to stay somewhere else. We found a nice nursing home nearby. It'll be good for you." I sat there in silence, the words not sinking in. A nursing home? But you promised. You said I'd have my own space, my own room. This was supposed to be a fresh start for all of us. "Mom," he said, his tone now cold and matter of fact, "it's just not going to work. The house is too much for us. We can't take care of you and the house at the same time. It's just not practical." I felt the sting of betrayal in my chest. The promise he had made to me, the promise of family and a new home, was being taken away just like that. The excitement he had shown before was gone. There was no care, no warmth, just the business of life moving on for him. I was no longer part of the picture he had painted. "Chris, please don't do this," I said, my voice trembling. "You promised I'd be with you. This isn't fair." "I'm sorry, Mom. We'll take care of the details. We've already arranged everything with the nursing home. They'll pick you up tomorrow." I didn't know what to say. I couldn't believe it was happening. I sat there for a long time after the call ended, not sure what to feel. I had helped my son, given him what he needed, and now I was being cast aside. The in-law suite, the dream of being close to my family, was all just a lie. The next day, Chris arrived at my house. He wasn't alone. He was with a woman I didn't recognize, someone in a professional suit. She was holding a brochure with a picture of a bright, clean nursing home. "This is Susan," Chris said, barely looking at me. "She's the director of the Golden Years Assisted Living Facility. We've already made the arrangements. They'll take good care of you." Susan smiled at me, a polite, practiced smile, and handed me the brochure. "Everything's already taken care of. We'll make sure you're comfortable. You can start your new life with us today." I stood there unable to speak. The world felt like it was spinning, and I couldn't catch my breath. This wasn't the plan. I wasn't supposed to end up in a place like this. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Chris and Lily weren't offering help or comfort. They were getting rid of me. I had been nothing more than a stepping stone for their dream. They had used me to get the house, and now that they had it, they were sending me away. I was just a problem to be solved, an inconvenience that didn't fit into their picture anymore. "I don't understand," I whispered. "You promised." "I know, Mom," Chris said, but he didn't sound sorry. He sounded impatient, like he wanted this over with. "I know, but it's for the best. You'll be happier there." With that, they began to pack my things. My home, my life was being taken from me. I was being moved to a place I didn't know, surrounded by strangers. I felt like I was losing everything I had worked for. I had built my life, my security, on my own terms, and now it was being ripped away. There was nothing I could do. I was powerless in this moment. All I had left was the anger burning inside me, the betrayal that was too much to ignore. They didn't give me time to argue. The moving truck wasn't coming. Instead, Chris had his car parked outside, waiting to take me to the nursing home. I was being driven away like an object that no longer mattered. The drive to the nursing home was quiet, too quiet. I stared out the window, watching the world pass by, but it felt like I wasn't a part of it anymore. The city streets, the familiar shops, the parks where children played, it all felt distant, like I was in a different world. I wasn't sure how I felt. Was I angry? Was I sad? All I knew was that I felt empty inside. The life I had known for so long was slipping away, and I had no control over it. Chris was driving, his hands gripping the steering wheel. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. I could see it in his face, the way his jaw was tight, the way he kept his eyes on the road. He wasn't looking at me. He wasn't trying to comfort me. He was just doing what he had to do to move on with his life. I wanted to scream, to tell him how wrong this was. I wanted to ask him how he could do this to me, after everything I had done for him. But I stayed quiet. There was no point in fighting anymore. I knew what had happened. I knew that this was the end. I had been used. I had been discarded. When we arrived at the nursing home, I felt a sinking feeling in my chest. It wasn't what I had imagined. It wasn't the warm, welcoming place I had been promised. Instead, it was a dull gray building with a cold, sterile feeling. The air smelled of disinfectant and something I couldn't quite place. The inside was no better. The walls were bare, and the rooms felt like they were made for people to fade away, not live. Chris and Lily helped me inside, and I felt like I was walking into a trap. I couldn't believe it was happening. I had spent my life taking care of others, working hard to build something for myself, and now here I was, being pushed into a corner, left to rot in a place like this. They promised me the world, and they had delivered nothing. The woman, Susan, who had been with Chris, took me to my room. It was small and plain, with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. It was nothing like the cozy little home I had built. There were no flowers in the window, no family photos on the walls. It felt cold and lonely. "I'll leave you to settle in," Susan said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You can get comfortable. We'll bring your things up soon." And with that she left me alone. I sat on the bed staring at the blank walls, trying to take it all in. My heart ached. How had it come to this? How had I gone from being the matriarch of my family to being nothing more than an inconvenience to them? I thought about Chris and Lily. I thought about how much I had done for them over the years. I had supported them through tough times, helped them when they needed it, and always stood by them. And now here I was, abandoned, left to live in a place that felt like a prison. They had used me to get what they wanted, and now they were done with me. I didn't know how long I sat there, lost in my thoughts. Time seemed to move slowly, like I was stuck in a moment I couldn't escape. Eventually I heard a knock at the door. It was one of the nurses, bringing my medication and a small tray of food. "Is there anything else I can get for you?" the nurse asked, her voice polite but distant. I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak. What could I say? I didn't want food or medication. I wanted to go home. I wanted to be with my family, in a place where I was loved, not abandoned. As the nurse left, I stared out the window, my mind racing. This couldn't be happening. I had been a part of their lives for so long, and now they had tossed me aside like an old piece of furniture. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know where to turn. All I had left was my anger and my sense of betrayal. But as I sat there, something inside me started to shift. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. They thought they could use me, take what they wanted, and leave me behind. But they were wrong. I wasn't just going to fade away. I had fought too hard for everything I had. And I wasn't going to let my own son destroy me. I knew I had to do something. I didn't know what yet, but I would find a way to get back at them. I would make sure they paid for what they had done to me. I may have been in this nursing home for now, but I wasn't going to stay here. Not forever. Not like this. The days dragged on, and every moment felt heavier than the last. I stayed in my room at the nursing home, staring at the walls, feeling the weight of betrayal pressing on my chest. I was surrounded by people who barely spoke to me, their eyes vacant, their lives just waiting for something to happen. I felt like I was slowly becoming one of them, fading away, invisible and forgotten. Chris and Lily didn't come to visit. It was as if they had already forgotten about me. They had their new house, their new life, and I was just an obstacle they had cleared out of the way. I could hear their voices sometimes over the phone, but they never mentioned me. It was as if I had never existed in their world. I could feel the anger building inside me, the pain, the disappointment. It was all turning into something else. I was furious. Furious at Chris, furious at Lily, furious at myself for believing them, for trusting them when they had no intention of ever keeping their promises. I had given them everything. My time, my love, my hard-earned money when they needed it. I had helped them when they were struggling. And this was how they repaid me, by using me to get a house, then dumping me in a nursing home like I was a burden they didn't want to deal with. I couldn't let this go. I wasn't going to just sit here and let them get away with it. No, this wasn't the end of my story. I wouldn't let them ruin my life, my dignity, without doing something about it. I thought about how my son had looked at me when he dropped me off here. His face was cold, his eyes empty, as if he didn't care about the pain he was causing. I had trusted him, I had believed in him, and now he had shattered everything. But there was still something left in me, a strength I hadn't realized I had. I wasn't just a helpless old woman, I was a mother, and I knew how to fight for what was mine. The first thing I did was call Maya. I needed someone who understood. Maya was smart, sharp, and strong. She had always been there for me, and I knew she would help me figure this out. When she answered the phone, I could hear the concern in her voice. "Aunt Helen, what's going on? Are you okay?" I took a deep breath before speaking. "I'm not okay, Maya. I'm in this nursing home. Chris and Lily, they've done something terrible. They used me to get a house, and now they've just left me here. They've abandoned me." I could hear Maya's silence on the other end of the line. She didn't say anything for a moment, then she spoke, her voice firm. "I'm coming to see you. We'll figure this out. I won't let them get away with this." Maya came to visit me the next day. She arrived at the nursing home with a serious look on her face, her eyes sharp and determined. She didn't ask me for all the details. She already knew what had happened. Maya was a financial analyst, and she understood the kind of manipulation Chris had used. She knew that he had taken advantage of me. "Aunt Helen," she said after hearing my story, "this isn't just about being left in a nursing home. They've committed fraud, and you've got the proof." I didn't understand at first. "Fraud? What do you mean?" Maya sat down next to me and took my hand. "Chris used you to co-sign the loan, but he never had any intention of letting you live there. He lied on the paperwork, saying you would be living in that house, when in fact you were going to be left here. That's fraud, and I'm going to help you do something about it." I was shocked. I didn't realize what Chris had done was so serious. I had signed the papers because I trusted him. I thought he needed my help, but now I saw that he had used me. He had committed a crime, and I was just part of it. I had been tricked, and now it was my turn to make things right. Maya was calm, but I could see the fire in her eyes. "We're going to report this, Aunt Helen. You don't deserve this. You've been wronged, and we're going to fix it." She didn't waste any time. Maya immediately began gathering information, looking through the paperwork, and making phone calls. She was a force of nature. She knew exactly what to do. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't alone. I had someone who cared about me, someone who would fight for me when no one else would. I knew then that I wasn't going to let Chris and Lily get away with this. They thought they could use me, but they were wrong. I was going to make sure they paid for what they had done. I wasn't going to sit in this nursing home and wait for my life to end. I was going to fight for my dignity. I was going to fight for the truth. And with Maya by my side, I knew I could do it. Maya didn't waste time. She got to work right away, gathering the necessary documents and information to start a formal investigation into the fraud. I felt a bit overwhelmed by the whole situation. At first, I hadn't even realized how serious it was. Now, I was learning that my son's actions weren't just cruel, they were criminal. Maya spent hours going through everything. She was determined to get to the truth. She made phone calls, sent emails, and pulled up public records. As she worked, I sat quietly in my room, waiting. I knew that what she was doing was important. It was my only chance to make sure that Chris and Lily were held accountable. A few days later, Maya came to visit me again. This time, she looked even more serious. "I've found what we need," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was a fire behind her words. "You were right, Aunt Helen. They lied on the mortgage application. They didn't just mislead the bank, they committed fraud." I felt a lump in my throat. I had known something wasn't right, but hearing Maya confirm it made everything real. Chris hadn't just lied to me. He had lied to the bank, and that was a serious crime. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice shaky. Maya smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they know they're about to change everything. "We make a call." She pulled out her phone and showed me the number. "This is the bank's fraud department. We're going to report what happened. You don't need to worry. I'll do all the talking. You just need to tell them the truth." I took a deep breath, feeling both nervous and relieved. For the first time in days, I felt like something might finally go my way. I wasn't going to just sit back and let Chris get away with this. I was going to take action, and I had Maya to help me. Maya dialed the number and handed the phone to me. My hands shook as I held it, but I knew this was my moment. This was my chance to make things right. I had to be strong, even though I felt like my heart was about to break. The phone rang for what felt like an eternity. Finally, a voice answered on the other end. It was a man's voice, calm and professional. "Good afternoon," he said. "This is the Fraud Prevention Department. How may I help you?" I cleared my throat, trying to steady myself. "Hi," I said softly. "My name is Helen Price, and I need to report a case of mortgage fraud." The man on the other end didn't say anything at first. I could hear the sound of typing as he pulled up the information. "Can you please explain the situation, Mrs. Price?" I looked at Maya, who gave me an encouraging nod. I knew what I had to do. I took a deep breath and spoke clearly, telling the man everything that had happened. I explained how Chris had asked me to co-sign the loan, how he promised me I would have my own space in the new house, and how he had lied to the bank, saying I would be living there when I never had any intention of doing so. The man listened quietly, not interrupting me. When I finished, he asked a few more questions to confirm the details. I answered them as best as I could, feeling both relieved and scared at the same time. It was happening. The truth was coming out. "Thank you, Mrs. Price," the man said after a few moments. "We take these kinds of allegations very seriously. I'll pass this information along to our investigation team. They'll look into it right away." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in days, I felt like I had done something right. I wasn't powerless anymore. I had taken the first step to make sure Chris faced the consequences of his actions. After I hung up, I looked at Maya. She smiled at me, a proud smile. "You did great, Aunt Helen," she said. "This is just the beginning. The bank will investigate, and once they do, Chris and Lily won't be able to hide from what they've done." I nodded, but inside I felt a mix of emotions. I was relieved that the truth was out, but I also felt a deep sadness. This wasn't just about money. This was about family. I had trusted Chris with everything, and now I was left picking up the pieces of a broken relationship. But there was no turning back now. I had made the call. I had taken control of my life again. And no matter what happened next, I knew I wasn't going to let Chris and Lily get away with using me. This was my fight now. The days after the call felt strange. I didn't know what would happen next. Maya had done her part, and now the bank would take over. The truth had been told, and I had done what I could to make sure Chris and Lily faced the consequences of their actions. But I still felt a mix of sadness and anger inside me. I couldn't believe my son had betrayed me like this. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't just sitting by waiting for life to happen. I had done something, I had taken control. But there was still the part of me that was waiting, wondering how Chris would react when he realized what was happening. What would he do when he found out that the truth had come out? I didn't know, but I was ready for whatever came next. It didn't take long for the fallout to start. A few days after I made the call to the bank, Maya came to visit me again. She had a look on her face that told me something important was happening. She didn't waste time. She sat down next to me, her face serious. "The bank has started their investigation," she said. "They're already pulling the documents and looking into the loan. It's moving fast." I could see the satisfaction in Maya's eyes. She knew that Chris and Lily were in trouble now. I could tell she was relieved. She had worked hard to make sure the truth came to light, and now it was starting to pay off. "Do you think they'll be caught?" I asked, my voice quiet. Maya nodded. "Yes, it's clear that Chris lied to get the loan. The bank won't ignore it. They'll take action." The idea that Chris was facing the consequences of his actions made me feel a strange mix of emotions. Part of me felt glad that he would pay for what he did, but another part of me felt the weight of our broken relationship. He was my son. I had loved him, raised him, and now he was paying for his lies. I couldn't help but feel guilty, but I knew I had done the right thing. He had made his choices. I couldn't fix what he had broken. A few days later, Maya came back with more news. This time it was bigger. "The bank is moving forward with the foreclosure," she said. "They've already issued a notice to Chris. They've found the fraud, and they're taking action." I felt a heavy silence settle over me. I wasn't happy to hear that Chris was losing the house, but I knew he had brought it upon himself. He had lied to the bank, and now the consequences were coming for him. The house was gone, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. I can't believe this is happening, I said, staring out the window of my room. I never thought it would come to this. Maya put a hand on my shoulder. He made his choices, Aunt Helen. He lied to get what he wanted, and now he has to deal with the consequences. You didn't do anything wrong. I knew she was right. But the pain of it still hurt. I had spent my life teaching him the value of honesty and hard work, and now it seemed like all that had been for nothing. He had thrown it all away for the sake of a dream that wasn't even real. The next week I heard from the nursing home that Chris had called. He wanted to speak to me. I wasn't sure how I felt about talking to him. I had been avoiding his calls, but now I had to face him. Maya encouraged me to take the call. She said it was time for me to hear what he had to say. When I picked up the phone, I heard Chris's voice. It sounded different. It didn't have the usual confidence or arrogance. It sounded small, almost desperate. "Mom," he said, his voice shaking. "I don't know what to say. I know what I did was wrong. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought I could fix things, but now I've lost everything. The house, my career, my marriage." I listened, but I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say either. He had used me, lied to me, and now he was apologizing. But the apology felt empty. It felt like it came too late. "I'm sorry, Mom," he continued. "I never meant to hurt you. I was just trying to build a life for myself. I didn't think about the consequences." I paused before I spoke. "Chris, you made your choices. You lied to me, and you lied to the bank. You thought you could get away with it, but now you have to face the consequences. I won't help you anymore. You did this to yourself." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Chris didn't say anything at first. And then, in a voice that was barely a whisper, he said, "I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it." I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know if I could forgive him. Part of me still loved him, but another part of me was too hurt to let go of the betrayal. He had taken everything from me, and now I was left with the pieces. The call ended soon after. I felt a weight settle on my chest. It wasn't the end of everything, but it felt like the end of a chapter in my life. Chris had made his mistakes, and now he had to live with them. I had done everything I could. I had done what was right, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally free.